Hi, I'm Bill Torgerson. Welcome to Storm Talks. This is kind of the viewer mail portion of Storm Talks. First of all, I want to thank Aaron, who didn't really have a question. He said he's excited. Aaron and I played a little ball one day over in Taffner, so he thinks he might be looking forward to the class someday. I'm going to start with Emma, who had a question. She's a former student of mine, and she says, what is the purpose of learning or reading short stories in literature class? So I felt like Emma was maybe saying, what's the relevance of that? And so I would say, if you're into wine, why do you appreciate a good glass of wine? Or why do you go to movies? Why do you listen to music? I think some of the answers to those questions would have a lot to do with why you would read a story. And I think there's a Chekhov quote that says something to the effect of, it is not the function of art to solve problems, but to present them clearly. And so I think you read a story and you might think about things that you've never thought of before. Now I'm going to go to Miriam, who says, I've come up with a new style of writing, one that I'm very confident in, but I really want to utilize it somehow. Start putting my writing out there. Any ideas on how to do so? And then going with Miriam's question, a similar one, Liam says, I actually like to read and write. Thank you, Liam. Very refreshing to hear that. I'm constantly doing both. Is there anything you have to say to me? And so I think early good advice for someone who wants to write is to read and write a lot. If you want to be a basketball player or you want to play the tuba, then you should get a tuba and start playing. And so reading and writing a lot, I think, is a starting place. But very soon after that, I think you need to learn how to read like a writer. So you could go out and practice the tuba or practice shooting a basketball. But if you don't have any sort of instruction on what maybe you ought to be doing, it gets pretty hard to get better. I also think, and I just gave this advice recently, I think you should get interested, and if you're asking questions on Facebook, you probably already are, interested in digital media. So I think the amount of writing that's going on today, as opposed to 10 years ago, it's hugely increased. So we're all looking at our phones and our laptops, and there's lots of writing there. And so if you can live and talk and be a voice in that environment, I think you're in pretty good shape. And so now I'm going to, we had a question from a writing consultant, which, thank you, Alyssa. And I think one thing I want to bring up is that this question is going to be read at our faculty meeting tonight, and we're going to talk about this a little bit. So if you're watching this and you leave a comment, all of us are certainly paying a lot of attention to what you're saying. And I will edit, Alyssa had a lot to say, which is fantastic. Many of the first-year writing faculty focus their courses on personal, reflective, and responsive writing. But it seems that students are not being given the tools they need to write a solid research or analytical paper in the first year composition or later in other courses. And so I'm torn between reading the rest or talking. So let me address that just a little bit. I think, let me defend the personal first, even though if all we did was write about the way my house looked when I was 12, I could see where you're saying that I do see some problems with that. But also, no matter what you do in class, if no one remembers it when the class is over, then you've wasted your time. So if all we're doing is identifying thesis statements and doing Regent-style writing, and everyone forgets it by the time January rolls around, then we haven't really done anything anyway. And then also a personal story can be a great argument. I read, for example, a story called Crossing Over, which follows some families from Mexico as they make their way into the United States and find work, and I really saw them as heroes as I read the story. And so that's very different than being presented with a thesis statement about what immigration law should be. Sometimes stories also serve as really compelling arguments. So I think that kind of opens up the idea of what an argument can be. And then the second part of Alyssa's comment, I feel that if students felt more confident in their academic writing abilities, they would engage more with their material and what they're writing and become more interested in all those too dry or too open topics that turn students off from writing in other classes. I think the freshman composition classes are great, but I want to know Prof. Torgerson's opinion as a first-year writing professor on this issue and how he chooses to run his course and why. So let me talk a little bit about that. I use this metaphor: writing floats on a sea of conversation. And so when you talk about situating yourself academically, I think that goes very much with what I'm saying. If you want to be a pharmacist, what are some of the main voices saying about pharmacy? What do you have to say in relation to that? And so if you're telling a story of immigration, if you are trying to figure out how to practice your Muslim faith in the Western world, these are all conversations. And I wouldn't talk about situating yourself academically. However, I think we're speaking somewhat of the same language when I talk about a conversation. And so that seems like a panel. It seems like a book or an hour-long talk. So I'm really abbreviating a lot. But it was a great question, and we're going to talk about it more tonight. And I think... Oh, and I think I have one more, and someone here maybe will alert me if I've forgotten somebody. Brittany, a high school student in Indiana, had a comment for us, and she said, "I have always been really reluctant to share my writing with anyone, whether just to read for fun or be critiqued. I know that I will have to get over this to better my writing. Do you have any tips or suggestions on how I can get over this?" I imagine students being in groups and having to share their work in more classes than just composition. You can maybe talk to me, let us know if that's true. First of all, I don't know that you have to get over that fear. I think one thing I want to stress is if you want to be a writer, there is an almost infinite number of ways to do that. There's no reason that you couldn't hole up in the woods for the rest of your life and write and send it out and be a writer. However, if you're a student in the composition classes, I do think that you're going to be put in a situation where you're going to have to share your work. And we were just talking about today, we were just in groups today. And so, among all the reasons I have, let me get to the point here. Audience. There's a gap between you, what you mean to say, and what gets heard. And you can't really experience that gap until someone leaves a comment on a Facebook post or a YouTube video, or till you're sitting in the room with people and they're experiencing your words. I mean, for example, we had a student who was talking about Ho Chi Minh, and so everyone in the class was supposed to know that we were talking about a city, but there were people in the room who were like, "Who is Ho Chi Minh?" and that Ho Chi Minh and Saigon were the same city, and so that when we see, and so there was lots of confusion. The writer thought all those things would be obvious to everyone in the room, and so he learned that some of our geography and history was not what he thought it might be, and so he saw that gap, and then he made changes. So I think, Brittany, if you want to write, you'll begin to value having a real audience. So I want to thank everybody for your comments, and I'd love to have this conversation going. I'm on Facebook as Bill Torgerson. You can call me Torg if you see me on campus. So I'd love to hear from you. I'd love for you to come up and say hello. Take care. Thanks for watching.